Hello! My name is Bisa, and welcome back to the Pokémon Corundum Dev Diary. In the last video, we went over the redevelopment of Oldale Town as a market suburb of Petalburg City, and since then, 18 hours of development live streams have happened, so today let's catch up with 2 maps in one episode. Before we get into the time-lapse though, let me fulfill one of the most common requests over the past few weeks. There is now a Discord server for this project. Well, actually it's just my personal community server, but there's now a public invite link in all of my video descriptions, and it has a section entirely dedicated to Pokémon Corundum, where you can chat about the project, get early sneak peeks, and share your feedback and ideas. There's even an FAQ thread that I will try to keep updated as well as I can as development goes on and more questions arise. Now, let's actually talk about one of these questions though, as it is one that has come a lot on the dev streams over the past few weeks, and one that I believe poses an actually pretty interesting game design challenge. How am I going to deal with HMs? Now, here's the thing. HMs are a controversial topic at the very best. Their removal is one of the few praises modern Pokemon games get almost unanimously, but I personally think there is a lot more nuance to HMs as a mechanic that I believe has gone horribly underutilized, both by Game Freak and other ROM hack creators. For now, the plan is to keep HMs in the game as they are, but instead of almost forcing the player to keep an HM slave pick up Zigzagoon around for everything, my intent is to make the weaker slave HMs like Cut, Rock Smash, and Flash entirely optional, spare for Rock Smash in Rust-Turf Tunnel, and to actively use the fact that they take up a move, if not an entire party slot, as a balancing opportunity for the areas locked behind them. Obviously, you can brute force your way through everything in Pokemon unless you play within self-imposed set of challenge rules, but I believe this is the most interesting compromise that still fits the faithful vibe that I'm trying to go for with the game. Other HMs that are mostly fine in terms of move power as they are, like Strength and Fly, will probably stay unchanged, but Water HMs will have their quality of life updated, with both Dive and Waterfall being able to be used like Surf, but not each other. The main reason I'm doing this is because I think both should see a lot more use, and since the ever-changing nature of Hoenn is a big part of this hack, I want to use them to much more heavily encourage backtracking, locking some spicy post-game rewards and Pokemon in earlier areas behind these late-game Water HMs, and today's subjects of Route 102 and Western Route 103 are perfect examples. Now, one other thing that I want to do with these games that might set off alarm bells for some people is that I am aiming to remove the majority of rock barriers from water maps, and Route 103 is a great example of this, as the bay that splits this route into 2 halves theoretically connects to the sea we cross over on Route 110. Usually this wouldn't matter, as rock barricades bar the player from traveling further into the bay, but their removal means that once you get Surf, you will be able to surf along it and end up on Route 110 close to Mauville via a long way around, while maybe picking up some goodies and rare Pokemon on the way. Now, let's talk about the broader concepts behind the map design here, because there's actually a lot to look at here. While Oldale is roughly located where the city of Takeo is, the real-life counterpart to this bay on Route 103 is Kyushu's Ariake Sea, and more specifically, Isahaya Bay, located roughly 30 kilometers south from Takeo, a large tidal flat that became the site of a major land reclamation project in the early 80s, sparking a large environmental movement from locals which was the core inspiration for the story and themes of the Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald Pokemon games, and is represented in the game via the land bridge on Route 110. If you want to know more about all of this background stuff, I highly recommend Tamahiro's review of Ruby and Sapphire from a few years ago. She does a great job of going in depth on it and using it to view the games through a more mature lens. I will leave a link to the video on the end card and in the description. All in all, the region between Oldale, Slateport, and Mauville is kind of a macrocosm of the entire Hoenn region. Not just in terms of its themes and inspirations, but also in terms of what I personally connect with it. So as a way to honor the inspiration from the Isahaya land reclamation, while also putting a more optimistic twist on it, I've decided to turn this bay inside out, from an inlet into a river. And that's what the hidden, blocked-off dive spot is for, as this is where the river emerges from an underground spring cave that the player will be able to explore. Additionally, I also added a bit of extra verticality with a full cliff that we will see a couple more times, replacing the upper ledge and connecting to the east side of the route with a bike rail that's meant to represent a small cargo monorail track used to transport the goods that are sold in Oldale. There's also a small pond here in the northwest of the map, as a slightly expanded version of the pool from the game's opening that Oraz already placed here, with a secret base tree acting as a stand-in for the leaf hanging over it until I get some custom graphics set up for it. And later on, there will also be a connection to the expanded version of Petalburg Woods on the west side of the map once that is done. The eastern side of Route 103 will follow once I have a more clear vision of Route 110. So in the meantime, let's hop over to Route 102. In the original games, this is a very calm route, but also the first challenge the player faces starting off their journey. Frankly, while I tried to keep the first steps vibe intact, this is the first time I'm going entirely off script, and am reworking a route into something I believe is simply going to work in favor of the gameplay and environmental storytelling, while still keeping its basic shape and outline intact. Oldale is meant to be a quiet yet lively suburb of Petalburg that offers goods from all over the region to those who are unable to go out there themselves, so it would only make sense for these two places to be logistically connected much better. This means, as the player progresses through the game, a road will slowly be extended from Petalburg towards Oldale, making backtracking on foot easier over time. While I tried to preserve the majority of the route's iconic features, I shifted many of them around quite a lot. Youngster Calvin is now an optional trainer. Well, this somewhat undermines his function as the first non-rival trainer you're supposed to fight. This is a decision I've made for balance reasons, as longer routes means more wild encounters and more EXP as a result. While players can obviously still just challenge him and get the reward for it, it will help to keep players who opt to choose to skip optional trainers more in line with the power curve. His demotion to an optional trainer also balances out at least a bit, as youngster Alan is now a mandatory trainer if you want to get the route's iconic Oran and Pecha berries, which are now placed in their own little grove that you can access from both sides of the route without entering tall grass, where we can also see the cliff from Route 103 re-emerge. Don't worry about the very sloppy end cap off this cliff, I'll come up with something better looking later on. Similar to the berries, the southwestern clearing has moved to the east a bit, and will now connect to a wilderness area that will unlock later in the game, with a new, inaccessible small lake taking its original place. Both this lake and the endgame berries it will house as a reward for curious players are just about visible from the main route, and attentive players are probably going to remember this once they acquire Dive. One more addition you are probably quite confused about is the addition of a house with a fenced-off passage. This passage too will connect to a new area in Petalburg Woods, and the house is a ranger outpost. I've always felt like rangers, be that the trainer class or the more fleshed out concept from the ranger games, are criminally underutilized, so I'm bringing them in here. This is also linked to a change I believe is going to be much more controversial. Due to the changed character of this route from a calm, short trek through the forest into a long-term, small construction project between Oldale and Petalburg, the single most iconic Pokémon of this route doesn't really fit here anymore. To quote the Emerald Pokédex, a Ralts has the power to sense the emotions of people and Pokémon with the horns on its head. It takes cover if it senses any hostility. So, yeah. Ralts is kind of hard to work into the new concept of this route. However, I believe that together with my stream chat, I found a great solution for this. You might be wondering what this means for the Wally catching tutorial, as he wouldn't be able to run into Ralts here anymore. But the Pokédex entry in Ruby tells us otherwise. This Pokémon rarely appears before people, but when it does, it draws closer if it senses the person has a positive disposition. While this is already somewhat reflected in the catching tutorial as is, the new Petalburg Woods area connecting to this route is where Ralts are going to live now, meaning that the one Wally catches is one that ran out of the safety of the woods specifically because it sensed him, which will also be reflected by some updated dialogue for the tutorial as to not confuse the player about why they can't find a Ralts on Route 102, but Wally can. Wally's arc is very weak in these games, and I want to do him a bit more justice than Victory Road jump scare, and I believe fortifying the start of his journey like this is a great way to accomplish it. Wow, that was a lot, but I hope you enjoyed it. There's no gameplay demo this time around, as there are still a few bugs I need to iron out, and I'm currently working to get a first development build ready to roll out. For more info on all that and more, check out the Discord. Remember, the link is in the description. My name's Bisa, thank you so very much for watching. If you liked it, do just that to let me know what you want to see more of, and subscribe so that I will see you next week when we tackle Petalburg City. Have a good one!